This is Jerry Barrett speaking. Today's date is May 9th, 1986. Yesterday, in a conversation with Captain J.J. O'Donnell, retired president of ALPA, he provided me with a telephone number. The number is area code 718-651-1316, which is a recorded message put out by the MEC in the New York area. I'm dialing that number now, and I'm going to record the message that's given on that recording.
Sunday, May 4th. Gentlemen, with our council tape now back in working order, I'll attempt to give you an update on several important subjects. As many of you have observed, there hasn't been much news coming out of the MEC office, so I'll attempt to fill the void. On the issue of the merger, by now you've no doubt become aware that meetings are continuing with other principals to structure a deal which will result in an offer to outbid Lorenzo for Eastern. The details of the composition of the planned offer remain confidential, but will hopefully be available in the near future. Prerequisite to the offer being meaningful will be a successful lawsuit to break the lockups that were given to the Texas Air Corporation by the Eastern Board of Directors by the terms of the merger contract. A great number of people believe that the deal with the Texas Air Corporation is already cast in stone, and that's apparently what Eastern management and Lorenzo wanted everyone to believe when they stated that the TAC already owns 51% of Eastern stock. They neglected to comment on the fact that 51% referred to includes 21.5 million shares of Eastern's common that goes to the Texas Air Corporation under the terms of the merger agreement. And that if the agreement is invalidated and the 21.5 million shares returned, the Texas Air Corporation would find itself with just about the same number of shares as those owned or controlled by Eastern employees. A little over 6 weeks ago, the MEC authorized and directed the commencement of litigation to block the TAC-Eastern merger, with it being the obligation of the master chairman to see that this was accomplished. As of this date, that direction has not been complied with, and no explanation has been forthcoming for this failure. Another major obstacle that must be cleared before the merger is consummated is Department of Transportation approval. The DOT has ordered that full evidentiary hearings are to take place before that body will render its decision on the merger. That decision is not expected for several more months, so don't despair, there's still hope, and it ain't over till it's over. After recently receiving a check for that which represented your salary earned during the month of March, you no doubt recollected that almost 10 weeks have passed since that early morning of infamy on the 24th of February, when after several major pieces of erroneous information were represented to the MEC as facts, a majority of the MEC voted in favor of ratifying the company-mandated agreement. In the early part of that meeting, the MEC was told that if 2 out of 3 concessionary agreements from ALPA, the IAM, or the TWU were in place, the company would not be sold. Subsequently, the MEC was told by Hank Duffy's administrative assistant, Randy Babbitt, and Bob White of the Contingency Planning Committee that the flight attendant agreement was in place. And if that was so, only one more agreement in place would prevent the tentative sale to Lorenzo. A motion was made by Don Davidson to ratify the company proposal. After much debate, the resolution to ratify was defeated. Subsequently, the defeated resolution was reconsidered, and during the ensuing debate, Larry Schulte interrupted the proceedings with an emotional plea to, quote, pass it now or it's sold. Then, through a total breach of parliamentary rules and disregard of MEC policy, which had been previously implemented to prevent this type of happening, and to guarantee the membership a vote on ratification, the MEC vote was taken without the question being properly called in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, and in total disregard of a request for a roll call vote. When the MEC voted, many members, no doubt, felt that an affirmative vote would prevent the tentative sale from occurring, as that is exactly what was implied when the Master Chairman said, pass it now or it's sold. That took place at 2:57 a.m. on February 24th. The fact is that the tentative sale was approved by the Board of Directors 19 minutes earlier. Later, it was also disclosed that the flight attendant agreement was not in place, which directly contradicted the information previously given to the MEC by Randy Babbitt and Bob White. So the MEC, in an effort to best protect the pilots, based on the information before them, and in the short span of 5 hours, were duped into accepting a contract which in some areas set us back more than 20 years, and at the same time did not prevent the tentative sale. Comfort was then offered to the MEC by some proponents of this insult by stating that we were better off going into a deal with Lorenzo with an agreement in place and with a scope clause in place than without one, which only shows that under adverse circumstances, some people are capable of rationalizing almost anything. The fact is that we had 45 more hours to go before the strike, which you authorized by more than a 97% vote, was to commence. And the flight attendants were already free to strike. Does anyone really believe that Lorenzo would want the company with the pilots and the flight attendants on strike? There's no doubt in my mind that a much more acceptable agreement would have been reached during those critical 45 hours. Another fact, which you should be made aware of, is the statement by President Duffy after having a breakfast meeting with Frank Lorenzo. He told the MEC that Frank Lorenzo is really attempting to establish himself as a legitimate businessman and is not a union buster. Remember, that's after $70+ million of your money was spent to fight the Continental strike. Ever hear of the Stockholm Syndrome, Hank? We'll talk about it some more in November. Well, anyway, after the MEC became aware of the fact that they'd been had, it was suggested that there wasn't any legal agreement until the document was signed by the president of ALPA. Hank Duffy was present at that time, and he informed us that he had already signed it. It will be enlightening to discover what it was exactly that President Duffy signed other than a blank piece of paper, since negotiations are still underway with major differences developing over the issues of labor protective provisions and parity with the other Eastern labor groups for any across-the-board pay increases. Now that the company has taken back your money, and taken back your work rules, your benefits, your vacations, your Type 2, among other things, they don't want to talk about labor protective provisions and parity. And remember, this was included in their own proposal. Another subterfuge appears to be in the making, as the issues of labor protective provisions and parity are seemingly being addressed in the form of letters of agreement. The distinct danger here rests in the fact that if there is no resolution and the problem is eventually addressed in court, the company will probably argue that the dispute is only over the letters of agreement on labor protective provisions and parity, and attempt to continue to impose the parts of the contract that we find so onerous, and take their chances on litigating the open issues. Well, they might try that, but that's not the way the MEC understood it. And like any other contract, neither side gets to pick and choose the pieces that they like and reject those they don't. You either buy the whole thing or you reject the whole thing. It became pretty apparent 5 days after the capitulation that we were headed for another problem when, in a joint application by Eastern and Texas Air Corporation to the Department of Transportation, a request was made that labor protective provisions not be imposed. So much for good faith negotiations. Not too different than expected, though, considering the lack of integrity displayed by them so many times in the past. The question now is, how long do you want to wait before raising hell about the fact that without those issues being resolved, we really don't have a contract? In recent weeks, there's also been a very significant first on Eastern Airlines, which has not been reported to you, although considering the gravity of the event, I felt confident that you would have been informed by the Master Chairman by now. A bit of background information is required so that you can better understand its significance. Some time ago, Larry Schulte took it upon himself as Master Chairman to form a committee known only as Special Projects. Only one pilot was assigned to that committee, and his charge was known only to himself and to the Master Chairman. As I recollect, it was during an MEC meeting in January that a written report of the activities of the Special Projects Committee was distributed to the MEC by the committee chairman, and he answered questions relative to its contents. Owing to the sensitivity of the contents of the report, which was clearly marked confidential and restricted, the MEC meeting was closed to the general membership. The MEC was reminded once again of the sensitivity of this report and its confidential nature, and at the end of the presentation, many of the copies were destroyed. Subsequently, there was another written report made which had an even more restricted distribution. 3 weeks ago, the chairman of the Special Projects Committee, who was a Boston-based captain with about 20 years seniority, was ordered to Bob Shipner's office in Miami. At his request, I accompanied him, along with ALP attorney John Loomis. Don Davidson, Boston Council chairman, was also present. Captain Shipner appeared with Marty Saul, an Eastern attorney, and Mr. Brown, an attorney from the firm of Gambrell Russell on behalf of the company. Bob Shipner laid down a packet of papers. One was a copy of the confidential and restricted report given to the MEC in closed session. Another was the report previously mentioned, which had an even more limited distribution. The third part of the packet was a 4-page letter of termination, based primarily on these reports, which were supposed to be the Special Projects Committee work product, confidential and restricted, and so marked, and discussed only in an MEC closed session. And here they were in the hands of the company and forming the basis for their decision to terminate his employment. Bear in mind that this man had been acting at the request of the Master Chairman and reported to him frequently and in detail as attested to in his report. He had also served the association almost continually in various capacities over his entire tenure with Eastern. Larry Schulte was informed of the termination within a few hours and told that the company's actions were intolerable and in fact would be cause for a wildcat strike on some properties, that the situation must be addressed and rectified immediately and forcefully. Since that time, the Council 51 representatives, as well as individual representatives of other councils, have requested in writing that a special MEC meeting be convened to address this problem. As of today, the Master Chairman has yet to call such a meeting, or for that matter, to even officially inform the MEC or the membership of this unprecedented attack by the company, which resulted from a union assignment. Incidentally, 3 days later, a 17-year Miami-based pilot was also terminated, allegedly for conducting a private investigation into certain areas that the company felt were improper for him to be investigating. Perhaps some of the information that you gleaned from this tape are cause for dissatisfaction and disenchantment. Well, believe me, you're not alone. And your Council 51 representatives are disgusted with the present situation, and we're ready to take whatever action that is required to make the necessary changes to assure the membership of honest representation, and where possible to make right some of the recent wrongs. We want your input on these matters, so let us know how you feel. Give us a call or drop us a note. Any new developments will be reported on this tape. That's about it for now. Thanks for calling. This is Skip Copeland, Chairman, Council 51.